My name is Joaquin Esquivel, I'm Chair of the State Water Board. Today is Tuesday, July 16th, 2019, and it is 9:30 a.m. And I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board members. To my left is Board Member Sean McGuire. To my right is fellow Board Member Tam Doduk, and to her right is fellow Board Member Laurel Firestone. Assisting us today is Eileen Sobek, our Executive Director, Michael Loffer, our Chief Counsel, Jonathan Bishop, Chief Deputy, Eric Oppenheimer, our Chief Deputy, and the Clerk of the Board is Janine Townsend, and assisting her today is Courtney Tyler. I'll just quickly go through our emergency evacuation procedures. As always, please look around and identify the two exits closest to you. In the event of a fire alarm, we are required to gather up our valuables and evacuate this room immediately. We are to evacuate to Cesar Chavez Park, which is across the street. Please obey all traffic signals and be careful when crossing that street. I also want to let you know this meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please speak into the microphone when you come up. And the most important item, please be sure to turn off all your cell phones and noise-making devices. With that, we're on to public forum. Janine, we have no cards for public forum. Public forum is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on an item that is not on the agenda. And so we'll go on to agenda item number 1, which is consideration of the minutes from the July 2nd board meeting, and I'll entertain a motion.
Move for adoption of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Aye, and it carries, and it's passed. I'd like to first note that we are going to remove item number 3 from the uncontested items list. And with that removed, I'd like to put up for a motion or a vote items number 2 and 4. And so, any board members like to make a motion?
I'll move for adoption of items 2 and 4.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries, and items 2 and 4 are passed. Thank you for staff on your work on that. Our lack of presentation is not a sign of a non-approving or thanks. With that, we'll go to item number 3 then, I believe, if Ms. Sobek, if that's best at this point. And so item number 3 was a consideration of a proposed resolution to delegate authorities for the administration of $5 million allocated from the general fund for testing and remediation of lead in drinking water at licensed child care centers. Staff are gathering themselves now. Good morning.
Sorry for the delay there. We're here to talk about testing and remediation of lead in drinking water at licensed child care centers. With me, I have Darren Polhamus. He's the Deputy Director of the Division of Drinking Water, Ellen Brooks from our Office of Chief Counsel, and Cecilia Asher-Folk from the Department of Social Services. She's a Policy Bureau Chief. So to start off, I don't have a clicker, do I? Okay, thank you. Wanted to give a little bit of background on the relevant legislation. So first off, we have Senate Bill 862, which appropriated $5 million from the general fund to the State Water Board for grants and contracts for testing and remediation of lead at licensed child care centers. We also have Assembly Bill 2370, which requires all centers that were constructed before January of 2010 to test their drinking water for lead. That initial testing can occur between January of 2020 and January of 2023, and then they're to test every 5 years after that initial test. And then finally, that bill also requires the Department of Social Services to adopt regulations by January of 2021. So one thing to note here with these dates is that initial testing at the centers can begin in January of 2020, and the regulations are not required to be adopted till January of 2021. So some additional things that are outlined in that bill. Number one, the department is authorized to issue written directives to the centers, which can be used to outline the requirements for testing prior to adoption of the regulations. In addition, there are some requirements for the Division of Drinking Water. Number one, they're to consult with the department regarding the development of the directives and the regulations, including the recommended action level for lead. They're also to facilitate electronic data submittal and notify the department of the results of the testing, and also post the tests online. And then finally, for the Division of Financial Assistance, AB 2370 mentions that we're to provide grants as funds are appropriated, and that sort of connects back to that other bill, SB 862, which appropriated the $5 million to us. So to give a little bit more detail about our process so far, the department has been holding regular stakeholder meetings since late 2018, and this is a list of some of the relevant organizations that have been involved in those meetings. Various advocacy groups, also the California Child Care Resources and Referral Network, which is a network of mostly nonprofits that do outreach to the centers to help them stay abreast of requirements. They do training. They also work with parents to connect them with the centers. We've also had water system representatives involved, Child Care Center Association representatives, UCLA Luskin School, Senate and Assembly reps, and then also, of course, State Water Board staff. As far as the timeline for the department's directives and regulations, so initially the plan is that the department will issue directives to the centers by the end of 2019, which will outline requirements for the testing that's occurring in 2020. Those directives will likely sort of set the framework for the regulations. And so the department is planning to create a task force that will include child care center representatives and parent advocate groups so that we can get their input prior to issuing those directives. Then for the timeline for the regulations, it's anticipated that those would be released in fall of 2020 with a hearing at that time, and then hopefully Office of Administrative Law approval in December so that they can meet the required adoption in January of 2021. Division of Drinking Water has been working with a technical advisory committee, which includes the Environmental Working Group, the Nutrition Policy Institute, Clean Water Action, several water system representatives, and also the department. The Division of Drinking Water has been putting together some recommendations for the department, and those recommendations are based primarily off of guidance that is issued by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. It's called the 3 Ts for reducing lead in drinking water in schools and child care facilities. So that's sort of the basis for the recommendation. And then also the Division of Drinking Water is also working with our Division of IT to develop a new database for implementation that should be available in early 2020. So this is sort of a high-level outline of the draft recommendations from the Division of Drinking Water. Nothing has yet been finalized, but in general, it's expected that centers will be required to sample all of the outlets that are used for drinking and cooking. They'll be required to utilize a qualified third-party sampler. They'll have to collect first draw samples, which means they have to collect the samples when the water hasn't been used for the previous 8 to 18 hours. So that means they're gonna have to collect the samples early in the morning on a Tuesday through Saturday. They'll have to use a lab that's certified for US EPA standard method 200.8 with a minimum reporting limit of 1 part per billion. Test results that are less than 5 parts per billion would be considered less than the action level. Higher than 5 parts per billion would mean that the center has to cease using the fountain or faucet and prepare a corrective action plan per the US EPA 3 Ts guidance. Some of the actions that they might take would include either replacing the fixture or permanently removing it from service. If an outlet is replaced, then they'll have to complete follow-up sampling to confirm that the issue's been resolved. And then finally, to give a little background on the Division of Financial Assistance and what our process would be moving forward. If the proposed resolution is approved, then our Deputy Director of DFA will have the authority to execute grant agreements. Right now, staff are recommending one grant agreement with University Enterprises Incorporated, which is a nonprofit that's associated with Sacramento State University. That organization would be responsible for statewide assistance to priority child care centers, contracting with the Resource and Referral Network, which is an organization I mentioned earlier that does a lot of outreach to centers, and they would do that initial work of bringing priority centers into the program. Also contracting with qualified samplers and labs to conduct the testing, funding the replacement of fixtures, and follow-up testing after fixture replacement. So if authority is granted, we're planning to have the grant agreement executed by the end of 2019 so that sampling can start early 2020. And we'll be working closely with the existing stakeholder group and possibly a smaller subgroup to draft the funding agreement. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any comment or questions from board members before going to public comment? And Janine, do you have public comment cards? Thank you. First, we'll call up Susan Little from Environmental Working Group. Hello. And the second card we have is from Andrea Ventura from Clean Water Action.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for agreeing to have this item reviewed today. Very much appreciate your taking the extra effort to take a look at it. As you know, this item number 3 is an action to authorize the board to initiate a contract to spend the $5 million budget allocation. I'd first like to move ahead, just thank the board staff for all the work they've provided on this issue. We have been working with them. I know that they have even spent some of their holiday time communicating with us about our concerns about how this is being rolled out. And so we really appreciate their work on this. We know they're trying very hard to meet the needs that are before them. But what I wanted to point out to you is that in 2018, the legislature approved 2 items independently. One was the Budget Act allocation, the $5 million that's before you today for spending, and the other is AB 2370, which was both items were EWG sponsored efforts. AB 2370 is a bill that sets up a licensing requirement for child care centers to test their drinking water for lead. The items were essentially pursued independently. There is some crossover mentioned between the two, but ideally, the idea that we presented to the legislature when asking for the $5 million was that we would like the centers to be able to, especially the key ones that are serving disadvantaged communities, to move ahead and test their drinking water before any kind of enforcement action was upon them. So they could do that voluntarily, do it without fear of reprisal or any kind of licensing action. However, we understand that there's some tight time constraints, and so we realize that there is this sort of crunch happening between the implementation of 2370 and the budget allocation at the same time. But as we've gone through this process, a very informal process with the department and with the board, what's becoming apparent is that the protocols the board is adopting as part of its voluntary, the budget allocation and spending that funding, those protocols are going to be wrapped into the AB 2370 requirements. And those protocols will be imposing the key elements of the 2370 program. That is the action level, sampling requirements, remediation guidelines, et cetera, are all encompassed within the board protocols. So we're putting a bit of the cart, we're feeling like there's a little bit of a cart before the horse going on. But again, we are recognizing that there's these time constraints, but even though we've been involved informally in the process, it's a very loose-knit group, and folks kind of come and go in terms as their time constraints allow in terms of participation. But there hasn't been an opportunity to officially comment. There hasn't been yet an opportunity of extended outreach to organizations to say, hey, this is something that we're we want you all to comment on, and anybody far and wide can have the opportunity to weigh in. Right now, it's kind of more of an insular group, and again, we appreciate being part of it, but we are concerned that other advocate entities, other organizations, and individuals throughout California that may want to weigh in on this will not have the opportunity prior to these protocols becoming instituted. And so our request of the board today is that as we move forward, with this contract, to once those protocols are finalized, to bring those protocols before the board for another opportunity to review them and to talk about them and to give folks the opportunity to formally comment on them. So again, thank you very much for your interest in this issue and for your ongoing support for safe drinking water for children. And we recognize that this is new. California hasn't done this before. And we're embarking on this brand new terrain, and we're trying to figure out how to do it best as we go forward. But there are some key benchmarks that we think the public should have the opportunity to comment and weigh in on. And certainly we wouldn't want to assume the role of representing all the environmental organizations out there or public interest organizations. That's not our mission. So we would like, again, to open this up so more folks can have the opportunity to weigh in. Thank you.
If I may ask a clarifying question. When you say protocols, which specific do you feel are, and when it comes to, and I'll let you respond to that and then ask a follow-up for staff.
Sure. So the sampling protocols that the board is now looking at and has drafted are holistically, essentially, the program. They will establish the action level. They'll establish how the sample's drawn, who draws it, at what time, how many draws are done, as well as then at what point is remediation required. And any other potential best practices or anything we would like to see in there. But any of those, all those elements are part of these sampling, part of these protocols, and those are the core elements of the program, really. So.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrea Ventura from Clean Water Action, and she'll be followed by Laura Dehan from CalPERC.
Hi.
Hello.
Good morning. As you said, my name is Andrea Ventura. I'm the Toxics Program Manager for Clean Water Action. And Clean Water Action supported the bills that were summarized for you when they were in the legislature. We come at this for the obvious reason that we need to protect children from lead, particularly infants and small children. When I first started, however, joining the stakeholder calls, we were very intent, Clean Water Action was very intent actually on first getting this $5 million out the door so that we can begin the testing and any logical remediation that was called for. And we had two reasons for that. One was obvious. The sooner we could start protecting at least some of the children of California when there were problems with lead, that would be a good thing to get moving on. But also we saw this as a way to inform the final decisions on the program moving forward. You know, what were the testing protocols really going to be? How were we going to educate the child care centers as well as anybody doing the testing? What did the guidance have to be? I think we could learn from those initial efforts. We are concerned, however, and we've kind of backtracked and, you know, kind of putting up our hands and going, wait a minute, because we feel that there has, to be frank, there's some confusion or a lack of clarity about where we are in the process among the stakeholders. And you heard some of this from Ms. Little, and I am repeating some of this. But let me first stop and say, I'm not here to be critical of anybody involved in the process. I think the staff of both Division of Drinking Water and DSS are well-intentioned, trying to figure out new territory where they have not worked together in the past, where they have different ways of moving processes along. This board is a very public way of doing things with public comment that is formal. DSS has other ways to do it. It's all legit. It's new territory. So I want to put that disclaimer out there, but there is, frankly, a lack of clarity amongst stakeholders on the calls, and I will give you two examples where my confusion has come in. One is something that Ms. Little just alluded to. We thought when we first joined that we were making those initial decisions on what was needed to do this initial testing and whatever initial solutions could be in place to spend the $5 million. But now we're hearing that whatever moves forward with this money will be the final guidance and testing protocols that child care centers will have to follow permanently. And that is concerning because we didn't feel we were quite there yet. Also, there's been a little confusion about the role of for me, of the Technical Advisory Committee. We know that various people were brought in, including folks from the water provider community, because they have the expertise on collecting samples for lead and other contaminants. And that's great. We want that expertise to inform this process. But now we're starting to hear policy suggestions, things like, maybe we can give a waiver if a system didn't test positive initially. And as we all know, lead can be very variable. And so I think there needs to be some clarity actually as to what is the role of the Technical Advisory Committee moving forward, because the laws were passed, the bills were passed with their specifications, and we shouldn't be making policy decisions that change that without going back to the legislature. So, on whole, we do want a public process that keeps us in line with the laws that were passed, but moves us forward in a way where we're not tying our hands now, that we're getting the information we need to move forward for final decisions, and that we would like that to be vetted by this board and allow for public comment and public participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Laura Dehan, Kalberg.
Hello there.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Laura Dehan. I am the public health advocate with CalPERG, the California Public Interest Research Group. And I actually just returned from being out on maternity leave, and today actually marks the very first day that my very young daughter is starting daycare. So this is a very important issue in my heart. And I've been working on getting lead out of the drinking water in schools as well around the state. And I've just not personally been able to be part of the stakeholder process, partly being out on leave, partly just focusing on the schools issue. And I just wanted to reiterate what Ms. Little and Ms. Ventura have stated, that this is a very big issue. It affects millions of children moving forward in the future, and that the health impacts of tiny amounts of lead exposure are known to be really significant. And if we want to protect children into the future, it's really important that we have an open public process in the development of these regulations. And so we also would really support opportunity to weigh in as the final AB 2370 regulations are put in place. We're really eager for testing to start happening so that daycare centers can start addressing the issues, but we, again, don't want to have the final regulations be decided without more public process and the opportunity to weigh in here in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Clarifying question? To staff, sorry, thank you. Does today's vote preclude an ability for further public check-in and process around final approval of the protocols?
Well, I think let's discuss kind of where we thought our role in this all was. So, we're inventing this from scratch. We were brought in to be technical advisors based on our experience with the school lead testing program and how to test water systems. And so we really just viewed our role as being that we're going to give technical advice, and then it's going to go to our sister agency, DSS, who is going to be the overseer of the regulatory program and establish it through their protocols and whatnot. So I think from my interpretation of what our role was is there, we were going to participate in the public work groups that were being put on by DSS and others leading to that, but there was not going to be a board action. There's really nothing other than technical advice from, our science staff as to what we would recommend, and it really follows almost exactly what US EPA has recommended from their 3 Ts guidance, and really just kind of like our hand-holding through that for all intents and purposes. So that's kind of how I was proceeding, and I'm open to certainly a discussion today, and maybe some clarification from DSS as to kind of how their process rolls. But I saw this more as their regulatory activity, not ours. And to be quite honest, I fought a lot in the creation of these bills because this was going to be a state board regulating. In the initial phases, there was contemplation of us actually regulating daycare centers for lead. And of course, that scared me dramatically as, way outside of our lane of what we do. And, eventually the bill came to be what it was, but they recognized that they didn't have an expertise in water or testing, and that's certainly appreciated. So we came to this role of, how can we provide some technical expertise, both in the initial phases of creating this program with DSS, and then ongoing in interpreting the data that does come in, and in this role of kind of an advisory to them as to what the data we see is and where we go from there.
And Chair Escobar, I think Deputy Director Polhemus did a great job of summarizing the regulatory lay of the land. But quite pointedly, the resolution today authorizing the Deputy Director to enter into the contracts for the $5 million in general fund does not preclude this board either receiving additional reports as this moves forward in the division of drinking water, nor does it preclude this board from having further process. I do think it is important to recognize, this is a little bit of a different regulatory scheme. We're not going to be the ultimate regulators, but if you wish to continue to have more direct oversight on what is going over in terms of your staff's comments, that is an option available for you, and nothing precludes it based on the board's or the action that's before the board today.
And just for a little bit more clarity as it relates to the grant agreement itself, at this point, we don't necessarily plan to outline specifics of sampling protocols in our grant agreement. We would simply refer to the department's directives and make sure that it's implemented consistent with that.
That's very helpful. Board members?
And since we have representatives from the department here, thank you for coming today. Perhaps you could provide some clarification or more details in any way with respect to your process and moving forward, especially. What is your stakeholder engagement process and public comment process?
Thank you for having me here. We have, since the AB 2370 was passed, we've been conducting public stakeholder meetings every other week, essentially, and some weeks much more frequently, and just getting feedback with the various groups who've been weighing in and participating. And those meetings have been open to anyone who wants to join in. To the extent we've had so much involvement and we have people joining kind of late into the process that it's a lot of people catching up with where we're at this point. So we are currently breaking into smaller task force groups that one would focus on the grant and one would focus on the database requirements, and then one on writing guidelines. And then we would report back to the larger group once a month in order to make sure that this is moving along faster. We absolutely welcome further board involvement, further hearings. We are interested in this process being as transparent as possible. One of the issues, though, I want to provide some clarification on is between SB 862 and AB 2370. We've been trying to explain for a while that under SB 862, the department has no authority. All of the authority that we have for overseeing this program and providing written guidelines and developing regulations is with AB 2370. So any testing, that happens at this point, it's unclear how that would unfold. And I'm also aware that in order to move the $5 million and allow for that to go to the prioritized centers, that a grant agreement would have to be in place. So it's not something we can start, spending money and providing that assistance at this point. AB 2370, recognizing, I think, when we were developing the bill, regulations take a while to go through the process. It's generally considered a 2-year effort. So it provided for the department to establish written instructions, or what they call all county letters. We actually call them provider information notices, or PINs. That's what our division does in terms of providing guidance to licensees in the field. So what we're doing right now, we're in the process of writing those guidelines. We're just starting because we've kind of come to a point where we've been provided some technical guidance, and based on that, we're starting to put together some written instructions as to how the testing would proceed. And from that, we hope to learn and then develop further the actual regulations that we would put through the regulatory approval process. So that's a kind of quick overview of where things are at right now. We, in terms of the task force that we're developing, we're looking at representatives from all the various groups. We want at least one person who can represent and then report back to their groups, including parent advocacy groups, center associations, center owners, water advocacy program members, the Department of Licensing, and also the Water Board. And, we've been very open to try to make sure whoever, wants their voice heard will be a part of these task force and will actually be a part of writing the guidelines and instructions. So there'll be kind of transparency and direct involvement from the, ground up.
Thank you for the additional detail, and thank you for your comments on further engagement with us. I think what I would like to suggest is that as your process move forward, actually, what is the timing of your process?
The testing requirement starts January 1, 2020. So our intention is to get written guidance, written instructions in place prior to that. So between now and then, we will be developing, writing, and sharing it with a larger group, getting feedback until we get a product that we are, collectively comfortable with moving forward. And then the regulations need to be adopted and in place by January 1, 2021. So we're looking at the very latest. We would have to present the draft of regulations in the fall of 2020. We're hoping to do it earlier than that, but and that would give us essentially almost a year to get through the regulatory process.
But in any case, the guidance you expect to be moving forward, and at some point close to finalization, say in the fall or so of this year?
We are kind of the components that need to tie together are the grantee has to be in place in order to start incentivizing and allowing centers that qualify to start testing and being reimbursed for testing. And also,
So in other words, we need to do our job too.
right. And there's also a database that needs to be in place because there's language in the law that specifies, a timeliness of reporting into the database, and the notification process is spelled out as well. So those pieces all kind of have to come together at the same time and be ready. And I think we're on track for all of that to be in place, ideally by the end of the year and by the beginning of 2020.
And so I would like to request formally that before you finalize those guidance, that we conduct just an informational item where you and our staff obviously would come and advise us on what your thinking is, what your process has been to date, and that way, at least I, for one, would appreciate a better understanding or a better appreciation of those guidance before you put them into place. And that would also give stakeholders the opportunity also to at least provide us with their thoughts, since we're not intimately involved in the process that you will be conducting.
Can I?
Board member?
So I think this, to me, is also a challenge in that it is new territory. We haven't worked with DSS very much, and we really appreciate you coming here and working as hard as you have, and appreciate staff collaborating so closely in developing this new relationship. I think, we recognize the importance and the role and the appropriateness of DSS in regulating childcare facilities. That's what you do. But I also think what we do as in our Division of Drinking Water is look at the technical aspects of what should be an action level, as what appropriate sampling protocol should be. And so that's why the legislation set it up that way. When the Division of Drinking Water came over to the Water Board, one of the many reasons why that transition happened was to value the public process that the board provides around drinking water regulations, drinking water, and the whole drinking water program. But the way that it was done doesn't structurally set up quite as well for board action, because many of the items don't require board action. So I think this is a good example of ways in which I hope we can build in more direct public process with the board into Division of Drinking Water actions that may not require board action, but may be appropriate for public input and use of board meetings. So specifically, for example, normally if we were doing it under our regulatory program, we would hope that, certainly in MCL and other standards, have a public process where there is public comment. And in this case, because we're not the ones adopting regulations, we're just providing the technical aspect. That isn't, that step kind of gets skipped. And I think it would be helpful for us to be more deliberate in starting to build that in throughout our drinking water programs. And this is a really good example of that, of like when we may need to go an extra step in requesting a public, at least information item, even though it doesn't require board approval, just so that we can follow and understand significant and really important technical guidance and levels that the Division of Drinking Water is making. So I would just request that for this process. Certainly I think we should get this money out, approve the resolution. I think this is a really exciting program. I think the sooner we get the money out and start that testing, the better. I agree with Member Dudok that it would be, I think it's important to make sure that there's a public item, information item with us, especially after we start doing, we start getting some of the testing results so that, and before the regulations are set, so we can make sure we're learning from that process and there's an opportunity for public discussion and input. And I really appreciate on both sides just the level of stakeholder engagement in developing, but I do think there's sort of a different set of people that are able to meet weekly on things versus, a single public meeting and comment. So I think both of those are important to build in. We'd like to be able to help really focus, I think, especially on with this board, the more technical drinking water aspects of, ultimately action level and remediation and sampling type things that I think normally would be Division of Drinking Water type guidance that would be more appropriate for our board, rather than weighing in, on the areas of expertise that DSS has. So to summarize, I think I agree with Member Dudok, and I also just would encourage our staff to start to build in more regular updates as we are providing significant technical recommendations around division of drinking water, either for the folks that we regulate or for, in this case, the Department of Social Services that regulates other centers.
Thank you, Board Member McGuire. Any thoughts?
I'll just echo the sentiments of my fellow board members who I think articulated the issue and the concern well. So I agree. I think some additional public process here is in order. I also think you do have a good opportunity here with the engagement processes that you're already establishing and the work groups that you're meeting with frequently to hopefully engage the folks that came here today. If they're not already participating in the process, please reach out to them directly and ask that they do, so that they can start to weigh in and provide input as soon as possible. Because I appreciate the fact that the clock is ticking, and you do need to have this program in place and ready to go by January 1, 2020. So time is not on your side, but certainly I appreciate the progress that you've made thus far. So, and I also ask Mr. Bohemus and Ms. Tosny to please continue to work and look for ways to share this information publicly as well, to make sure that we're able to incorporate any public input in between information items as those get scheduled.
Thank you. I do want to be careful that we respect the regulatory role that the department has here and make sure we are appropriate in the space that we inhabit within there. We obviously have a safe and affordable fund that we'll be implementing, and a lot of staff time that's being taken up by a number of priorities. So we're glad to have a sister agency in that space with us. And I think that to ensure that we're additive and that this is useful, I would recommend maybe that we focus that informational item, not just necessarily on your program, but you can be there to help update us in that moment, but just on the protocols then, what are the appropriate space around which, I think it's between the database development and the protocols that we'll transmit or otherwise communicate to the grantees or the department that we'll be using that is the most appropriate space for us. So maybe if we kind of focus even then, making sure that the informational item is more around that and that scope, it can make sure that we are appropriately putting our resources and making sure that we continue to provide the respectful space as you orchestrate the larger regulatory program, which we're obviously part of and want to see success in. So if that is amenable to our board members, and that can be our direction to staff, and I then would entertain a motion.
What he said.
Okay. Yeah. I'm happy to make the motion. I'm just trying to decide the wording, so maybe we can get help.
Yeah. Do we need specific, or is direction from the bench enough, or do you need
No,
language?
I think staff has clear direction from you to bring this back at the appropriate point in the technical advisory process and consultation with DSS.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So the motion can be simply to approve the resolution.
Well, I will move to approve the resolution.
I will second with, I think, a reminder, based on what Board Member Firestone said, that even though we're giving staff direction with respect to this particular item, the broader underlining request is at some point we'd like to engage with Mr. Bohemus and Ms. Sobek on the issue of just general drinking water activities, especially those that don't come before us for formal action, and get more regular updates, informational items, and the opportunity for stakeholders to perhaps get a better understanding of what DDW is involved in those general areas. Is that correct? Okay. So I'll second with that additional request.
All in favor?
Aye.
It carries. And thank you all for the really engaging discussion, and appreciate it. Thank you. And with that, well, time check, 10:14. We can do one more item, then have, well, we each have two more items, and then you want to go through, okay. Tam said we're going through it, Laurel, so don't blame me when we don't have a bio break. Item number 5 is consideration of a proposed resolution adopting an emergency regulation amending the Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program fee schedules in Title 22 of California Code of Regulations, Section 64806. And staff will gather up.
There you go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is John Weir. I'm with the 3-branch unit, and to my left, as you know, is John Russell, our Deputy Director, and to my right, Kim Niemeyer, who's our attorney for the program. So the, do we have the clicker? Oops, sorry about that. Thank you. So so we prepared a presentation for you today that just highlights why we're here today, why we're actually coming to you here in July at this time as opposed to in September, and a look at the fund condition that supports the ELAP program, and then our proposal to resolve the projected budget shortfall. So the reasons for increasing fees right now simply is that the fund that supports the ELAP program does not have enough reserves, nor is the program generating enough revenue to cover the projected expenditures for this year. This is in part because we projected that the ending balance for last year would actually deplete all of our reserves to the point where we're actually ending up in a negative of about 42,000. And also that, and this didn't come in as a surprise, that some extra funding that we'd received from public health that came when the program came over to the water boards back in 2015 was set to expire. We shared this, by the way, with our stakeholders back in 2017. We had 2 or 3 meetings where we had shared with the stakeholders that this special funding, supplemental funding, was going to be expiring, and that the real funding necessary for the program was over $4 million. In fact, I believe at the time, $4.1 million. So again, this isn't a surprise. What really kind of threw us off is that we anticipated the new regulations that are being proposed to already be in place at the beginning of this fiscal year. Those would have generated enough fees to have funded the program if collected over the full year. When we realized that the delay in implementing those regulations would be putting the new fees with it being collected too late in the year to collect a full year's worth of revenue, we realized we had to act now. Understand that the ELAP program collects fees throughout the year. This differs from our other programs which bill pretty much for the entire year in one sitting. On average, we're collecting just shy of about 60 a month. So we did consider coming to the board in September as we normally would, but we realized that if we did, that would just delay our ability to collect the higher fees, and as such, we'd likely be coming before you with an even higher increase. So we decided to take the action now. the fees that we are expecting to collect through the ELAP regulations are likely to take effect next year, starting July 1st. So if we take a look at the fund that supports the ELAP program, this is the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund. This table illustrates what the fund looks like this year if we keep the current fees in place and what it'll take to eliminate the budget shortfall. So if you can see from that first line in the middle column, the adjusted beginning balance, as I said, we're actually starting in the negative. And technically speaking, we realize we can't end a balance on a negative number, and we expect to work with the budget office to redirect some costs to zero that out. But if you look back at that middle column towards the end where it shows an ending balance, you can see if we took no action, no increases for this year, we would be at a deficit of $572,000. On the right, in that last column, this illustrates what would happen if we increased fees by 20%. If we did that, we anticipate a total revenue of about just over $4.2 million and an ending balance in the positive of about $128,000. This would give us a fund reserve just over 3%. If you look historically in the last 4 or 5 years, we typically maintain a fund reserve around 10%, but we didn't want to increase any more than is necessary other than to eliminate the deficit and get us through the next year or so when the new regulations and fees hit, they can take over. By the way, we did share this fund condition with our stakeholders back in the June 13th meeting that was held. So the actual proposed fee increases that we're recommending applies to the 2 fees that fund the ELAP program. The program's funded by what essentially is an application and base fee and field of testing fee. Staff recommends we increase the initial application annual base fee of $1,890 to $2,268, which is a 20% increase, and to increase the fee of $851 for each field of testing a laboratory request to be certified to $1,021, also a 20% increase. We anticipate these new fees would generate the $4.2 million necessary to fully fund the program. Oops, sorry. So as far as our outreach was concerned, we want to emphasize to the board that we do regret that we didn't have more time to discuss the state of the program with our stakeholders, but the delay in the new regulations put us in a bind. We did hold a stakeholder meeting on June 13th to discuss the need to increase the fees to balance the program. During this meeting, we shared with them the ELIF fund condition that you can have as attachment 1, and we revealed that with the negative fund reserve and the fees that were needed to establish, we're going to be in the manner of 20%. We also held a previous work meeting back in November of 2017 and included a discussion of fee options similar to this and the need to generate what was then a $4.1 million program. It was at that point we were also explaining them that the special funding that we had gotten from public health would be setting to expire. So it is something that we tried to get ahead of the game, even as far back as 2017, in order to have the community understand what it takes to fully fund the program. As far as, and the last increase actually was back in March of 2017, so it's been about 2.5 years since the last increase. We did get some receipt of comments. We received 6 written comments by the July 11th deadline. In conclusion, staff recommends the board approve the resolution to adopt the change in the current ELAP fee structure as proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. Any comments from board members? Mr. McGuire?
Thank you. I certainly appreciate you coming up here today and understand with a fee-supported program the need to stay whole. I mean, there's certainly only so much you can do there. Just curious as to what comments you received, if any, from stakeholders during your outreach meeting or in the comment letters you just mentioned, and how those weighed into your recommendations today.
As far as the nature of the comments that we received, I would say we can group them probably into 3 different groups. One was that there was a resistance to having the fees increased, not surprisingly. There was a concern for a lack of progress on backlogs of accreditation. Also, there was a concern that the increase in the fees would affect laboratories such that some laboratories would choose not to have fields of testing accredited, dropping out of the program, which it would result in a smaller base of fees that would be, the entire program would be based on, which would further need to increase fees.
If, on that note, how significant was the increase, the last increase?
The last increase, I believe it was nearly 50%.
Yeah, it was fairly significant. I think the 2 previous increases, it increased it by about at least 90%.
Yeah. Did we see a significant drop-off of laboratories and testing methods?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
To answer your question, specifically was 57%.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, is that all? And anything further from? Okay, yeah, we have 2 cards. First, I'd like to call up Debbie Webster from the Central Valley Clean Water Association, and she will be followed by Anna Borchard from the Association of California Water Agencies. Hello, good to see you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Escobar and board members. Debbie Webster with the Central Valley Clean Water Association. And first of all, I want to say congratulations to ELAP for 5 years being at the board. We wholeheartedly supported the change to ELAP moving over at the board. And through that, really felt like the programs were going to meld. We knew that there was going to be a learning experience. We knew that the program was underfunded, and we knew that that we were going to see increases. And we've seen them, and they've been hard, and they've been hard to take. But I think if you read my comment letter or our comment, Civica's comment letter, it really goes to what is the overall cost of compliance, and what are we seeing with ELAP, and what is the level of service that we're getting for the fees that are being paid for. We've had some serious concerns with the level of service, with some of the outreach and training, with the proposed regulations. We spent an incredible amount of time looking at them and trying to make them work for us. We know that they're still working through those things, but with them are going to come additional cost. And so that overall cost of compliance, what services are we going to get? What are we going to have to pay for out of pocket? What is this program going to overall cost? And can our smaller labs really afford it? Are part of our concerns. And so really, I'm not here today to oppose the fee, but more to say that as stakeholders, we really need to be engaged. We want to be engaged. We've been offering to be engaged for a long time, and so we want to do that. But we need to be able to understand and to work together in order to make this program really viable and to have it function like it needs to function, especially for our POTWs, which really provide an important function for environmental and health safety. So with that, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate your advocacy, as always. And I know, I've had just recently a conversation with staff around some of the work that they've done specifically with some smaller systems or smaller laboratories, that is, and walk through, some of the process. And there's been some good outreach there, I know, but I'm always sensitive and feel that we should continue to rise to a level of service here. And it does take resources for those services, and I agree with you that we need to be able to articulate to you rather what exactly the services that the community is getting back. So I appreciate it. Next is Adam Borchard from the Association of California Water Agencies.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. My name is Adam Borchard. I'm with the Association of California Water Agencies. Aqua appreciates the opportunity to speak on this agenda item. I would like to echo the comments provided by my colleague, Ms. Webster. Second, I would like to thank Division of Administrative Services and ELAP staff for having that joint stakeholder meeting on June 13th. One of the requests that Aqua had was that the fees and the program be considered together because they are integrally linked, and I think it would lead to better public participation and hopefully a better process. With respect to the specific fee increase for fiscal year 2019-2020 and developments in 2019, I think it was a little less than an ideal process. We were part of the 2017 stakeholder outreach. We would have probably liked to have seen an earlier announcement this year, maybe in 2018, that these fee increases were definitely going to move forward. Given the information provided by staff today and at the June 13th stakeholder meeting, we understand that this proposal is before you today for adoption. So moving forward, Aqua is looking forward to being engaged with State Water Board staff on the development of the fee regulations and the new fee structure. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. If I were to ask staff what they project over the next, say, 4 years of the program, what fee increases look like, would staff be able to give too much? So I'm not, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but all to say is that we should be able to usually project out a little better sometimes our need and communicate that even sort of years out. And I know we try to in our fee programs largely, and I just don't know if we can give folks a sense, where 20% increase now, but what does it look like in the next few years? And I know the program is still mid-stream, so.
Yeah, before Darren gives his little
appreciate that, John.
thing from the administrative part, we're changing fee structures right now. That was the program changes that were alluded to and why this kind of came out of left field at the last minute. So once we see what the fee structure is, then we'll be in a little better shape to do some of our projections to see what the fee increases will be.
Thank you, John.
So Darren Pulliam is Deputy Director for Division Drinking Water, but obviously also over ELAPs within my area. So, I don't usually like to play I feel like a kickball, but part of the reason we're at this point is because we've been taking so much time working through the regulations and trying to tie the new fee component with that. So, we thought we were going to be presenting a holistic package of new regulations, the fees as part of that, and really changing the fee structure so that it's not set up. It'll be much more you basically pay for exactly what you want to get out of the program rather than a kind of a broader you pay within a field of area and then you may not or may not use all of it. So it'll be better. It's a little hard to predict at this point exactly what the levels of that will be, but it'll be distinct enough that I think it starts to struggle the comparison as to kind of how we do the fees now with there. So I'd kind of like to beg that we present that as a holistic approach when we're at that stage with you and have kind of the joint presentation on the regulations and whatnot. So
I can appreciate that.
But it will be substantially different, and we want, we've been trying to go through the public process to bring people along on what that looks like.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Darren. Yeah, done with my.
Yeah, so I appreciate the stakeholders coming and just the fee payer, the folks that are paying these fees, really understanding and valuing what they're paying for. And I think that is, it's a challenge at the board because we're a fee-based organization. There's, pros and cons with that, but I think one important value is that there's so much investment from the fee payers in trying to make sure that you are getting a good value and service and really feeling ownership over the importance of the regulatory program. I think in this case, it's a great example because it has been so underfunded in the past. So there's a lot of ground, and I think the fee payers really understand that, which I appreciate because nobody likes having to raise fees or pay more fees. And then I guess I appreciate just the clarity and engagement that DAS has done around the process that we've had to take because of fiscal constraints, but that the ideal and as Mr. Polema said, the importance of looking at this holistically with the program. And so I look forward to being able to talk about that more. I know that's coming up, and there's been a ton of work going into that on both from stakeholders and staff. So I look forward to hearing that. And I would move to approve this item.
Great. Second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. It's adopted. Next, we'll move to item number 6, which is with the Division of Financial Assistance and is a consideration of a proposed resolution to authorize the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance to provide Clean Water State Revolving Fund financing to the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District for their ultraviolet disinfection project and advanced water treatment facilities. Good morning.
So good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. My name is Melky Calderon. I'm with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program in the Division of Financial Assistance. This item is to request for financing approval for the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District for 2 projects, Ultraviolet Disinfection Project and the Advanced Water Treatment Facilities Project. So the topics we'll cover in this presentation are just a brief agency overview, the reason for the proposed project, and a really quick project overview, and then the reason that the project is controversial by item number 3, the litigation, alternatives considered by staff in number 4, and then the division's recommendation. So the district provides wastewater management services for approximately 250,000 residents in the city of Santa Clarita. So the figure on the right there is the service area of the district. And so the district operates 2 wastewater facilities, one of the facilities being the Saugus Water Reclamation Plant, shown in the center by the red dot, and then off to the left is the Valencia Water Reclamation Plant. And so both of these plants discharge to the Santa Clara River, and so the Santa Clara River is shown by that blue line that runs across the service area. And so this is important because in 2002, the Los Angeles Regional Water Board imposed a limit of 100 milligrams per liter of chloride that could be discharged to the Santa Clara River by these 2 facilities. And so the district really wants to come into compliance as soon as possible, but no later than January 31st of 2022. And that is a deadline that the Los Angeles Regional Water Board has set for the district. And so the proposed projects for coming into compliance are the following. So the first is the replacement of the chlorine disinfection system with a UV disinfection system. So at both facilities, the systems would be upgraded to UV disinfection. And so that's an estimated project cost of $21 million. And the other project is implementation of advanced treatment, and that's utilizing microfiltration reverse osmosis. And so that project would only be upgraded at the Valencia treatment facility, and that's an estimated project cost of $110 million. And so both of these projects would eliminate chlorination byproducts and would allow for the district to comply with the chloride limits. So the reason it's brought to you today is because it is a controversial project because there's a lawsuit that is against the district challenging the project's environmental impact report by an advocacy group, local ratepayer advocacy group, Affordable Clean Water Alliance. This is actually the third lawsuit that's been filed against the district by ACWA, and so this is currently set for trial for this September. And so this is potentially problematic because it could result in a decertification of either part or all of the project's EIR. And so considering this, there were two alternatives that staff considered. And so the first would be that we would conditionally approve a financing agreement for both projects. And so that condition would be that the disbursements would be contingent on successful resolution of litigation. And so the advantages for this alternative is that it would provide the district financing certainty. The district would be able to move to construction, but it would also show the support by the State Water Board with the limit that the Los Angeles Regional Board has set. The second alternative is that we would stop reviews on both applications and not execute a financing agreement until litigation had been resolved. And so this obviously eliminates risk by the board with respect to the use of encumbered funds. So the division's recommendation is to approve financing for both projects, the UV project and the advanced treatment facility project, but with the following conditions. So the first condition would be that, again, the disbursement would be contingent on successful resolution of pending litigation. And then the second condition would be that financing agreement will expire if this litigation had not been resolved by June 30th, 2020. The deputy director would have the authority to extend the expiration date by 90 days given good cause. So with that, are there any questions?
Any questions from fellow board members? We have two public comment cards. I'll first call up Andrew Hall from the Los Angeles County Sanitation District, followed by Paul Beck from Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District.
So, thank you, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. Appreciate your consideration of this matter. My name is Andrew Hall. I'm the head of budget and finance for the LA County Sanitation Districts, of which the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District is one of our member agencies. We've been working with the regional board staff or with state board staff on this project for the past 3 years and appreciate their willingness and flexibility to work with us to address litigation concerns on your end as well as the financing concerns for us, and just appreciate the work that staff's done and appreciate your consideration of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beck?
Thank you, Chair Esquivel and board members. Just wanted to make a couple of points. The district sanitation districts have done this project to comply with the requirements of the regional board and have attempted to do that. I'm the principal litigation counsel for the district, so I've been living with this for about 5.5 years or so. So in order to do this and to serve the policies of the regional board and this board, the districts have proceeded. In fact, the court has allowed the district to proceed with this project. In fact, one of them has already broken ground. Notices to proceed have been issued in both projects. The opponents of this project basically don't want the project. They have opposed it and will continue presumably to oppose it. But their purpose does not appear to be consistent with either the policy of the regional board or this board. And the condition, the litigation condition that Mr. Calderon talked about before, would, I think, provide sufficient protection for the board if they approve the resolution here. So we believe that condition will eliminate the risk to the state, and we would just like to move the project along, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. With that, I'll put the item up for a vote.
I'll move.
Second?
All,
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
I think it passes. It carries. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. All right. Well, that brings us to board member reports. It was a light day. It was a light day.
Should I start over this end? Or?
Anyone can.
I'll start.
Yes, please.
Unless somebody else is. All right, so. So I missed the last board meeting, so I have a longer report. I've gotten to meet with a number of stakeholders this I guess at this point it's month or so. So I heard a lot from folks on the ELAP regulations coming up, being developed, and a lot of interest and concerns around that process, also around toxicity, which we know regulations are coming up, and around water loss from a variety of stakeholders. So I appreciate, all the engagement around those, and know those are coming up before us. I also was able to get tours from the Yuba Water Agency and the Delta tour with Board Member McGuire, which you probably already mentioned because this happened a month ago, but I haven't been at a board meeting. So it was really excellent. I learned so much, and I just appreciate the opportunity to see those watersheds and learn about the work there more. I was able to talk with Chair Esquivel at the Data Science Symposium, and it was a 2-day event, and there was so much great work and energy around trying to better use data and generate more data and make it more accessible. And so really excited about that energy and effort, and happy to be a part of it.
It was a full room on a 9 o'clock on a Friday, so it was.
Yeah, it was really quite, it was impressive. There were 2 studies that have been going on around drinking water that I wanted to mention that I was able to get updates on. One is that Corona Engineering has been looking at consolidation potential around the state, and another is the KUA and Pacific Institute and other stakeholders are working on a effort through Water Research Foundation, and I know Board Member McGuire reported before on a meeting with that. I think that's progressing, and there should be a draft report in the next month or so. So I think those are 2 really relevant reports, and appreciate partners helping us advance thoughts and learning in the area of safe and affordable drinking water. So I wanted to mention those 2 efforts. Heard from California Water Service around wildfire liability concerns, and an effort and that may happen in this legislative session to make sure that water systems aren't held fully financially responsible for wildfire impacts that they did not have any hand in committing. And so there's a whole legislative effort around that. And as part of that legislative effort, there's also discussion around how to be more specific around disaster preparedness and recovery planning, both for, actually that one's more around larger urban water systems, but I know there's the effort that DWR is leading around small and rural communities that's also around water shortage contingency planning that is relevant to drought prepared, or not drought prepared, well, that's relevant to drought preparedness, but more generally, I think related to disaster preparedness as well.
And if I can just flag something on that is, yeah, we are very fortunate to then have these 6 positions around emergency response. And so, you know, we as a board will be looking to do a lot more work in this next year and really charge up that team. As we saw with the Ridgecrest earthquake, we had, you know, there are damages to water systems that are still trying to recover. Thankfully, it wasn't in such a populated area, but I think the earthquake is definitely a reminder to all of us of the scope and scale of emergencies that we as a regulatory agency will have a hand in responding in. And, you know, had that been urban, you know, Los Angeles, it would have been not, you know, 3 systems knocked out. It would have been, you know, dozens, if not more. And so you know, we'll be looking to really utilize those 6 people in a really strong way, I think, in this next year. Because again, it's not just wildfire, it's earthquake, it's the whole gambit. So sorry.
No, I totally agree. Thanks for pointing that out. And also just on that note, wanted to recognize all of the work that Darren Palamas, that Mr. Palamas has been putting into, and also the Division of Drinking Water more generally, and like the district engineers and all the folks on the ground in response to the earthquake, and also more generally around safe and affordable drinking water, and the many issues under Division of Drinking Water. So there's been a ton of demands and responses, and just really appreciate the workload and efforts, and you know, coming on vacations all night to deal with emergencies. So
Here. Yeah, Darren was here on a Saturday manning our emergency, you know, desk for all of Cali, PA. So thank you, Mr. Palamas.
And so the last 2 are just, I missed the board meeting because I was was able to do the Cali PA retreat. So Cali PA is trying to bring together the different sister agencies and Cali PA to talk about both developing a strategic plan and strengthening our work together. So I think there'll be more information about how that is developing. It was fun. I was excited to be a part of it. But I think there'll be more of a report out from how that's developed. So I was part of a little working group that was looking at, that is just starting and I think still evolving, but was looking at kind of geographic focus areas and ways that all of our agencies that are doing work in particular geographic area focuses, like how we have around, well, we're all doing it, and so when we all focus on lots of jurisdictions or lots of locations around the state, but thinking about how we are integrating better for stakeholders and folks on the ground that don't know like all the different silos and jurisdictions that our agencies are, and we can better be a more integrated government interface with the public. So we'll see. That is really just beginning, and it doesn't even have, you know, clear process yet, but wanted to flag that. And then OEHA is developing their human right to water tool. We're expecting, was able to talk with them a lot about finalizing that, and we're hoping it'll be final and there'll start to be a process to roll it out at some point soon. Just to flag a few things that are coming up. There's a GARE meeting on Wednesday, and that is looking at how we can increase diversity in workforce within our constraints as a state agency. And there's a whole day workshop on that on Wednesday that I'm planning to participate in. I know other staff and EPA folks are as well.
What's the acronym GARE stand for?
Government Alliance for Race and Equity? No, I don't know.
I think I might be right. I just
something like that
for folks tuning in, and
I know I thought about trying to say it, and then I thought I don't know the last word, but it's something like that. Thank you. I will make sure not to mention acronyms unless I'm prepared to be fully confident on how to say them. We're hoping that we're really excited about the passage of the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Act, and we're looking forward to hopefully the signing and being able to implement that and talking more about that at an upcoming board meeting. And lastly is the CPUC. We've been trying to coordinate with the California Public Utilities Commission, I'll say that acronym, around thinking about how we've been working with them for a long time around safe and affordable drinking water, affordability, consolidations. They have an ongoing order hearing process underway and a rulemaking process. And so we've been talking with them a bit about, how when a new safe and affordable drinking water and funding source may impact the utilities that they regulate. There's a hearing August 2nd that they are looking at a number of affordability and consolidation issues. It's a public meeting. We have staff going, I know, but I just wanted to mention that because I think it's really relevant to the work that we're doing. And that is my long board member report. Thanks.
Mine will be shorter. Surprise. I was able to attend the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Board meeting. They also had a very quick, efficient meeting. I think you might have know by now that former board chair Terry Young resigned from the Regional Water Board. She's a great loss. She's been a great leader there on the board. I've had the pleasure of working her for many, many years, and I do want to thank her so much for her dedication and for her service. The Regional Board will be holding an election at the next board meeting in order to select a new chair. But they are looking forward to having an informational item on the governor's executive order on developing a water resilience portfolio. They'll have that discussion on September 11th. The Central Valley Regional Water Board has not finalized it yet, but I believe they will have that discussion August 2nd. So those two regional boards are definitely going to be grabbing that. I wanted to thank DWQ staff for their continuing work with stakeholders on the winery order. We had a meeting last week, which the vice chair and I both attended, with the Wine Institute to discuss ways which a sustainability program could be integrated into the order. It was a good discussion. They are going to be making some proposal to staff, and I appreciate the sort of little delay so that we can have those kind of discussions and perhaps find ways to improve the order. And then finally, a heads up for you, there is, I don't know if you're all familiar with CED, which stands for the California Environmental Dialogue. It was a group that was formed many years ago by actually very former Governor Brown, the previous one. Consists of industry groups, environmental organization, labor groups, and I think it was like twice a year they get together for a discussion of various issues. The next meetings coming up is July 30th and 31st in San Diego, and the focus will be on the climate change and wildfires. I'm able to go to only one of the days, so I wanted to toss that out there in case any of you are interested and available. Let me know. I'll forward the agenda to you. It's an interesting group, a mixture, always good conversation and good dialogue, not very many follow-up action, but still a good opportunity to network and dialogue, hence the name Dialogue. But it is, like I said, it is a very much a very engaging group with a lot of good ideas and a lot of opportunities for, just sharing, exchanging ideas and information.
All right. So last week, I had, and actually Vice Chair Diadamo had an amazing opportunity to go on a tour of the LA River Aqueduct, Owens Valley, and Mono Lake with LADWP via helicopter, actually. And it was, well, so yeah, Tam, I see the look on your face, and I'll say that it was my first helicopter ride in my life, and it was actually a pretty smooth ride. And so we had to stop and refuel a few times. And so after the first trip or so, I was pretty comfortable getting back in a helicopter. So I have good memories. But more importantly, it did really provide me, it was my first trip to Owens, the lake bed, to see all the restoration work that's happened there over the last many years. And it really is a phenomenal effort that, despite the legacy, I mean, we all know, with drying the lake, LADWP has put forth a really significant effort to controlling the dust issues on the lake bed through different strategies, with vegetation, watering, using gravel strategically in some places, even to the point where I thought, there's probably some lessons learned here that might be applied to Salton Sea. And I actually brought that up. I asked if Resources Agency or others had engaged with LADWP on sharing some of those ideas and cross-pollinating some of the, real experiences. And the answer is no, not really. That conversation hasn't happened. So I think there's an opportunity there because I think that, they are heavily experienced. I also got to see the restoration work they've done on the lower Owens River, which really is impressive, re-engaging the fisheries, putting water back in that river, and all the habitat that's come back. And then I had a chance to go back to Mono Lake and see that from their perspective as well. So it was really educational, informative trip and time well spent. And then last Thursday, I went to the Los Angeles Regional Board meeting in Simi Valley. And specifically, the item I wanted to mention was a discussion of the perchlorate issues in Simi Valley. And there was presentations from a number of the regional board and also the Department of Toxic Substances Control regarding the Santa Susana Field Laboratory and some of the legacy perchlorate issues there and sort of the delays that have been experienced over the last several decades in starting to clean up some of that pollution. And we heard from a number of the public about concerns regarding perchlorate concentrations in their drinking water. We heard from Golden State Water Company, who's the main water purveyor there, about what they've been doing about that. And I guess just two things I want to flag or highlight are, one, you talked about the retreat with Cal EPA, and I think this is a great example of areas where our different agencies under the Cal EPA umbrella can probably we're trying to do the same thing, which is clean up contamination, clean up groundwater. And, this is a great example of where I think, looking back, we probably could have worked a little bit better together in moving this forward, accelerating this work a little bit more quickly than we had. I don't know. It's just one of those things where, I have a hunch. The other is with regard to the MCL for perchlorate. I know that's going to come under review, but the first step in that process is lowering the detection limit for purposes of reporting. So I just want to highlight that. I know, Darren, you already have enough on your plate, but that's yet another item for you to move forward with. But that is critical so we can just get a better understanding of what are the human health risk issues. I know what the public health goal is, but what really are we seeing in drinking water systems? And then, of course, the next step, which would be to review the MCL and decide if any revisions are necessary. So it really opened my eyes to, the issues there in Simi Valley. I know that's not the only community experiencing that with regard to perchlorate. So I just wanted to share that.
The real item I have is that last Friday there was an Open and Transparent Water Data Act, AB 1755, public meeting. And so Department of Water, it was actually held in this room. Department of Water Resources was here along with our staff talking about the update around the legislation, where they are on the two data portals, and the work around the consortium that's been developed amongst a lot of the private entities and NGOs out there to kind of have a tranche of money for projects. But it was a good meeting, and it certainly folds into a lot of the EO discussions as well. I think yesterday, and I would also flag yesterday, I went to the Delta Plan Interagency Committee. I was going to say DPIC, and then I needed to follow my own acronym rules. Meeting, which is all the federal, state, local entities in the Delta, and we meet, I think it's quarterly, and to discuss developments. And we talked all about the executive order, and even Carla Nemeth, the director at the Department of Water Resources, brought up the importance of open data and needing to, it being a really important space. When we talk about, not unlike, say, within the One Cal EPA sort of family of, we're working in the same watersheds, we're trying to work toward the same outcomes, but we're not talking together in a way that ensures that at least publicly facing people aren't getting different sides of the state. And to the extent that the executive order is in that same vein, particularly when it's cross agencies and not just within the Cal EPA family, of the need to recognize that we all are working the same watershed, and how do we better share data, assets, information, and understanding of what's happening so that we can all be more effective. I think it's going to be important to all of that. So that was, anyway, it was a good meeting on both those sides. And that's all I really have. Do we have, we don't have executive director's report on this. Is it, do we? Yeah, it is this week.
We do.
It is this week. We do, so.
And I would like to say something
so bad.
about it, which
Please,
is
thank
that
you.
if you look on page 7 of the
We've moved on
report,
to
there's a much
item
more...
number 8 for those
Oh, sorry.
famed.
So eager to report on my report. The Division of Drinking Water has really provided a much expanded update of a lot of its work. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that and had an opportunity to take a look at it, including the permits that were issued over the last month and the enforcement and compliance actions taken over the last quarter. And then and there's a section of consolidations that were completed. So I think this is very complementary to the tables around Division of Financial Assistance about payments that are being made finalized out of their funds. So we have a little bit more of a snapshot of concrete actions being taken by both divisions in the drinking water world. It's not everything that you've asked for, but it's one of the many ways that we are trying to be more responsive and trying to provide more information in a useful way. When we, in a month or so, have a number of informational items before the board relating to the drinking water program and the expanded drinking water program, thanks to the newly enacted legislation, I think that we'll talk to you about some ways of tracking all or some of those programs in a different way. But this is a start in one of our traditional tools, the executive director's report.
Yeah, I'll just say I did read through all of them and notice that and really appreciate it. So it's not a waste of time for staff. I think that's really helpful, and it helps with public transparency to be able to take a look at that and see all of those, the list of actions. And I think it also helps us understand all the huge workload and, like you said, very concrete actions that that the whole board is taking and to accomplish our mission. So appreciate that. Thank you.
And following up on that, I actually have been referring people to the executive director's report. So my question is, when and how is that shared to the public? Because I notice it's not included as a link on the board agenda.
Yeah.
Maybe not this time, but usually.
Oh.
Usually is, yeah.
Usually it is. I know when.
Not on the copy I have.
Which Dropbox did you pull from? Are you pulling from Dropbox now, or from?
That's good then, that it is.
Yeah, it should be. But, I'm always interested in how do we unearth some more of that information. I know sometimes if you can feel it's kind of buried within the executive director's report, but for folks, there is usually a whole wealth where there's continuing ongoing information on there and about FisCal and how we continue to, update and make sure that we're trying to respond to that as well. So, I think to Board Member Dodek's point, making sure that people are, and we do direct people to it. So, yes, Board Member McGuire.
Yeah, I just in the interest of making this more publicly, just more communicating more broadly to folks that this is the executive director's report is a good place to go look and find information. One thing I've noticed at some of the regional board meetings that I've been going to is that the executive director's report item is actually closer to the front of the agenda than the back. And so I do think just something to think about. I'm not saying do this, but it is an idea because it would make it a little bit more, when there's more folks tuning in, paying attention, and listening. If there are updates from you, you'd be able to share those, more
So
broadly.
I'm laughing, Board Member Guy, because I have been here too long and we've come full circle. At one point on the state board agenda, the board member minutes reports and the executive reports were at the beginning of the agenda, like it is at the regional board meetings, and a discussion was had about how, we really want to get to the action item. We want people to be able to, stay, and so all of these information items were moved towards the end. But having said that, typically, historically, our board member reports tend to be shorter than the regional board members' report. So to the extent that, this new group wants to move it forward, that certainly would be, because I have attended some regional board meetings where the first hour is taken up with board member reports and executive director's report, which I don't think is ever the case here.
What might be useful is maybe just a once a month executive director item that. Well, no, but I mean at the front of the meeting. I know, not maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think your entertaining ability, you'd be able to hold all of everyone's attention for however long you wanted, Eileen. You would be like, people would be like, can we see more of her?
As long as it's under 5 minutes.
Can she do more items?
Typically, this is how the agenda is, just so that you guys all know. The first board meeting is always.
Can you speak into a microphone, please, in case? No, I'm kidding.
And please identify yourself for the record.
Identify yourself if you're gonna speak. I know. Speak clearly into the microphone, Ms. Townsend.
Hydro and the urban always are at the first board meeting. The second board meeting is always EPC report. Before, it always, the hydro and the urban water was every board meeting until the drought was over, and then we changed it to once a month. So I'm not sure if we want to move it. We can move it.
Well, I'm open to whatever us as a board would feel is appropriate, and knowing that the wheel turns at some point, we don't have to decide now. We can.
I don't think we have to
further.
decide today. I think I just wanted to bring up the idea and just think about it. And maybe it could be a quarterly or whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think that does provide an opportunity.
Yeah, and there are things in there that, although it may not be an item before the board for that meeting, is worth getting out to folks maybe.
So I would just say that one of the differences is that the regional boards expect essentially a summary of everything in the executive director's report because they don't have the opportunity to interact with staff. In the State Water Board, we've always just picked maybe one highlight out of it because you all are intimately involved in what's going on. And so it's one of the reasons we moved it to the back was that it wasn't really very useful as a summation of the report because you all read it.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. One is, I think because it's so short, it may make sense to just bring it up at the beginning, and because then it does help people know that to take a look at it as a source of information. But again, I'm up for whatever we decide. One thing I did want to request is, given how challenging fiscal has been both for us and the folks that are interfacing with us. And it would be great to get a regular update, maybe in this report about how that is going. And
I think the executive report does have a fiscal update currently.
oh, I didn't see it.
Do we pull it from there? I thought there was. I didn't read this.
I'm not sure it's in every report, and it might have been that because this was the closing of the fiscal year window that it was discombobulating. But we did identify this. The EO is executive director report as the place that we were going to have fiscal updates, and we have had them in the past. So
Let's make sure we keep them
Right,
monthly.
especially right now.
Let's make
I
sure
think
they don't drop off.
each month, just making sure there's a deliberate item there. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm just
and appreciate
looking
that.
to see, but yes, we will continue to do that.
Make sure you spell FizCal with $, please.
Sign, yeah,
Thanks.
okay, will do. So noted.
Sorry. All right. Any other discussion, comment before we close out at 11:14 today? Well, actually, sorry. We're not closing. We're going into closed session. So we will, if there is nothing else, we will reconvene at 12 o'clock in room 230 for a closed session on personnel.
And just to be clear, the other two items that are identified on the board's closed session agenda will not be held today. So only the personnel item.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.